Hello everyone! Welcome to the first episode of Fun Duck's Histocast.
My name is Sonia Larson.
And my name is Catherine Liu.
Fun Duck's Histocast is a podcast aimed to document our perspectives on the current world events and topics each episode with a different focus each time.
Today, our focus will be media representation.
So to first give some introduction on the subject, let's talk about what media representation is really referring to. So media representation refers to being able to see people of different groups and people having different experiences in outlets in the media, whether that be an advertisement, a movie, a TV show, but also seeing that the people that are creating this kind of media are also represented from many different backgrounds and cultures.
And this is very important because media has become such a large part of our lives in our current society.
Especially today, we are constantly exposed to the media, whether it be directly and purposefully through watching a television show or program, or even just indirectly walking down the street and seeing an advertisement on a building. Being as this is something that we're exposed to so constantly, it doesn't surprise me that it's very important. But some people can miss the true benefits of media representation.
When exposed to media, people benefit from being able to see themselves reflected in the content they're consumed. Being able to do this helps with not only inspiring youth, it can also raise self-esteem of those represented.
The same sort of validation and assurance can come not only in seeing people of the same culture or background as yourself, but also being able to see people that have had the same experiences. Exposure to people different from yourself in the media can also be vitally important in reducing stereotypes. Seeing people from different cultures than your own in the media often can help you become more accustomed to them and the differences they may have from you. This can be important, especially in reducing stereotypes, because people are able to see these people of different groups and cultures represented in ways different to the stereotypes that they may have held for those groups in the past. Historically, media representation has been a problem, as there wasn't much representation of non-white characters or people of the LGBTQ community, and even when they were involved in any sort of media, they were often painted into caricatures or stereotypical representations of those groups. As the amount of media has expanded over the years, there also has been an expansion in the amount of media representation. In the past decade or so especially, there has been a steady increase in the representation of many communities and characters especially, as well as with presence in advertising, etc. The issue of media representation clearly extends into today.
Just recently, on September 9th, Disney released the official teaser trailer for the Little Mermaid live-action movie, which is the remake of the 1989 animated version. So the planned release of this movie was on May 26, 2023, but after the trailer was released, the video received over 500k likes, but got 1.5 million dislikes.
Well, yeah, that's a pretty skewed ratio of likes to dislikes. Is there a main reason for this backlash?
Yeah, so this tremendous backlash is mainly directed towards the casting over Ariel, which is played by the 22-year-old black singer and actress Halle Bailey. Many articles were made, and including in the comment section of the original trailer, people were posting hate comments towards the casting over Ariel, saying that Halle is not the Ariel that they pictured because she is black, and how saying this race change made to this character is ridiculous and shouldn't be seen in this film.
Yeah, I saw a lot of backlash on social media as well, especially with the hashtag #NotMyAriel, which was trending on Twitter for a decent amount of time, which with people kind of continuing on with this idea that, she wasn't the right race, or talking about this kind of nostalgia culture where they wanted it to be like the animated film made in the 1980s.
In addition to all the hate comments, another thing that started occurring on the internet was using AI technology to change the features of Ariel and making her, basically whitewashing her to be another quote-unquote prettier white actress. And a lot of these videos were titled, "Oh, this is the new fix version of Little Mermaid." So basically, this word fix is very interesting because it basically had a lot of racist connotations, saying that she was a mistake.
Yeah, right. So were they just saying that by whitewashing these pictures of her, they were fixing her?
Yeah, exactly. And when those video creators got hate for saying, "Oh yeah, these videos are racist," they were like, "Oh, this is not racist videos or intended to be racist. It's essentially just that the Ariel that the Disney remake had didn't match their expectations of what Ariel should look like, because in the original 1989 version of the film, Ariel was white."
Doesn't that seem like kind of another problem in itself, right? That they're deciding that their expectations have to be this white character.
Yeah, so I guess it makes sense that people didn't think that it matched their expectation just because of the race change, but I feel like the Little Mermaid, come on, she is a freaking mermaid.
Yeah, her whole character isn't connected to her race. I guess I sort of understand some sort of backlash if it's some sort of piece of media where a lot of the plot or a lot of the character building is connected to that character's race. But I don't see any problem with, quote, changing the race of a character just in like a new version of it.
Exactly. The race is not a big part of Ariel's identity as much as characters such as Mulan or the girl in Brave.
Yeah, right, and being able to see these good values, which I think are the important part of Ariel's character, represented in a black actress as a black Ariel, I think is very important, and that we have a lot of this representation for white characters, even just in that animated film from 1989. But seeing that with a black character is almost seem way more important, right?
Yeah. So I feel like people are being so focused on targeting the casting and then the race issue that they forgot that the core message of Little Mermaid is to accept who we are and how that we should look past beyond looks. And I feel like people are directly ignoring the message of Little Mermaid and being so hung up on the idea that there is a race change, a change that was not seen in the previous films, when in fact, compared to the 1989 version to the original story, the 1989 version also had many different aspects that the original story didn't have. Like, for example, the red hair of Little Mermaid was not seen and was not one of the descriptions of Ariel in the original story. But as for light skin, the original author did talk about Ariel having lighter skin, but again, I don't think that the race plays in as much role as it does for other characters, and there were much more drastic changes made to the story compared to the race that didn't even receive as much hate as seen with this.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in any sort of adaptation, that animation that was made was an adaptation of the fairy tale. This is just another adaptation of this same story. There's nothing wrong with making the adaptations different from one another. In fact, that's a good thing. Otherwise, they'd just be the same movie over and over again.
Exactly. But I feel like even though I feel like the actor did not deserve as much backlash as she did, the fact that Disney is remaking all these princess movies in order to maybe increase their diversity in their princess films is also kind of confusing to me, because they're practically still milking their fattest cows, because they're not recreating new characters of different diversity. They're just starting to change the race of previous princesses, which is probably one of the other reasons why the people on the internet were mad.
Yeah, because I understand, clearly with this topic, wanting to have more princesses, right, from different backgrounds that can represent different communities, but it's not like we're only set to 10 total princesses that can ever be shown in media. But at the same time, do you think that Disney just cast Halle Bailey to improve their diversity?
Well, I think definitely there is a factor of them doing that. There's definitely this incentive, because Disney before got many criticisms over the fact that most of the princesses are in fact white. So this could definitely be a move from Disney to improve their diversity in their princess films. But also brings to the fact that maybe Disney didn't do it intentionally, how they only casted Little Mermaid for her voice and her acting skills, that they weren't originally looking for a black actress to cast for Little Mermaid. But a darker side to this is that they could just is using Halle to throw her under the bus for the profitability of racial triggering. Because what we see right now with the trend of people with these hate comments, mostly of them are from a different race that are not black. Once those comments are coming out, we see that the black community isn't responding well to them, how they're saying how these comments are essentially racist, which is why they're saying, oh, let's together as a black community, we're going to go support the Little Mermaid. And this is how I think Disney is using this a way to profit off of this racial triggering, because they definitely know that once this trailer released, there's going to be backlash over the casting. So essentially, before they release this, they already know that Halle will be getting a lot of hate for it, and yet they still chose and then remained with the original casting for the reason that they could possibly profit out of all the support coming from the Black community. And there were recent statistics showing how the Black community and people of color are a huge fan of films and movies and are like a very big portion of the consumers of the film industry.
So, considering that both of these perspectives are true to some extent, that Disney wants to increase their diversity, but, possibly wants to profit off of this increase in diversity, what do you think the balance between that is? Is there really any way to win this situation?
Well, I think that there are ways that Disney could truly have more diversity in their films without causing as much backlash as we've seen. So definitely a way that a lot of people on the internet are urging for are to produce new Disney princesses. So this way they do not have to remake one that is already of a race before that people already have clinging on, have a nostalgia for. So by creating new characters, it wouldn't invade the people with already a set perception of what the characters should look like. And this way they could also improve their diversity in their films, which I think is a good balance.
So, Catherine, overall, do you think that The Little Mermaid deserved the backlash?
Well, I definitely see how every movie, every adaptation of certain movies will definitely see some degree of backlash. It's normal, it's inevitable that there are people who are disappointed that the actors who are casted didn't match their expectations. But the amount of backlash that we see with the casting of Little Mermaid is actually just ridiculous if you think about that it's only a trailer and the amount of time that she showed up in the trailer is not even 5 seconds long, and she already saw so many hate and then so many new videos being created of her of a different race. So we see that not only is this just a general dissatisfaction towards casting, we see that it encompasses a lot more how we see that this current society is still unaccepting of new ideas and unaccepting of change. How once they have formed an expectation of what something is, if the thing did not match your expectation, we can see a lot of anger being directed towards that. And I feel like the actor certainly did not deserve all the backlash that we witnessed today.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think that the backlash was completely disproportionate to what was actually happening in the situation, especially considering that there were positive benefits that we've already seen from this representation.
Yeah, a lot of viewers are currently posting on social media reaction videos of their children watching Halle Bailey as Ariel and just having a smile lit up from their face, and these videos are just really heartwarming to see.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of videos like that too, just really seeing those young people actually being inspired and excited about seeing Halle Bailey as Ariel, right? It seems really significant to me. That's the whole point of the representation, and we can see that audience that it's important to have that representation for is taking that and is actually excited about it and is happy to see that.
Well, that was an intense topic. Time to move on to our daily pun section.
Woo!
Yay! So, Sonia, where do most koala movie stars live?
I don't know.
Take a wild guess.
A wild guess?
Yeah.
Do they live in the ocean?
They don't.
What about Australia?
Well, good guess, but the answer is Koalawood, California, of course.
Another recent example with media representation is She-Hulk, a Marvel TV series first released on August 18th, 2022, which is, I think, still releasing weekly updates now.
Oh, so I've never seen this TV show, actually. Can you give a brief synopsis of what it is about?
Yeah, so the She-Hulk TV series, at least so far, follows the life of the cousin of Bruce Banner, who's the Hulk. And she's a lawyer and becomes a Hulk after a transfusion of her cousin's blood into her own bloodstream, right? So she essentially went from her normal life as a lawyer to now becoming She-Hulk, right? This superhero, as she ends up revealing her identity to the world. But rather than the people who are encouraging her to become a superhero and follow this other life, she wants to continue being a lawyer.
So what's the issue with She-Hulk?
One of the main issues that people had with She-Hulk came really quite early on in the series. Right after the main character She-Hulk, or Jen Walters, became a Hulk, she spent some time with her cousin Bruce, who had been able to kind of contain the Hulk within him, to learn more about her new powers and the new lifestyle she would have to adapt to. In one scene, Bruce is trying to teach her about controlling her anger and how she has to be able to calm down and control her anger better. And Jen responds saying, quote, "Well, here's the thing, Bruce. I'm great at controlling my anger. I do it all the time. When I'm catcalled in the street, when incompetent men explain my own areas of expertise to me. I do it pretty much every day, because if I don't, I'll get called emotional or difficult, or might just literally get murdered. So I'm an expert at controlling my anger because I do it infinitely more than you."
Can you unpack the quote for our viewers?
Yeah, so this quote brings up a lot of different topics kind of in one quick response, right? It first brings up this kind of whole list of issues that women have to deal with in their lives, and that Jen Walters is saying that, she's had to control her anger for, right? Being catcalled in the street, an experience that can be terrible for women, as well as, mansplaining, which is a very difficult thing to deal with, right? And this idea that if she responds and doesn't control her anger, then people think less of her for it.
You talked about there being backlash, so what are the specific comments towards this scene?
Yeah, so I'd say that there's probably around 3 main responses that can be pointed to that people have kind of thrown out on the internet. Some people are really happy to see this perspective put out into the media. By seeing the experiences of women being pushed out and really forced onto viewers who may not otherwise be seeing this in like a Marvel TV show, it's broadening not only the acceptance that women who've experienced this are feeling with seeing this in this show, but also is exposing it to many other people. But within that, there's of course people who aren't very accepting. There's been many people that have responded saying that, catcalling isn't that bad, and kind of claiming that these problems that Jen Walters is bringing up and talking about aren't actually real problems that women have to deal with, essentially totally demeaning the experience of these people. The third response seems to come from a place more connected to the Marvel lore, where we see that Hulk's character, the person that Jen Walters Shield was talking to, has dealt with a lot of trauma in his life and his accepting of becoming the Hulk. And so they felt that Jen kind of lashing out in her response and explaining this to Bruce, took it, quote, like too far, or was something that shouldn't have been done in the way that it was.
Yeah, so on your second idea, I think that's very interesting when you talked about how they're reacting towards saying that woman didn't get catcalled whatsoever. So are those comments just lone cases, or do we see like a general trend of people making comments like that?
Yeah, so I think it's less of a comment that catcalling doesn't exist, but more of this idea that there are comments that are kind of denying the fact that any of these are a problem, and are saying that these things that she's opening up about, just not that they aren't happening in the world, though I'm sure there's some of that. There's always someone saying something like that on the internet, right? But more to the idea that there are people saying that it's not a problem that it's happening, that it's not something that we should be working towards fixing as a society, which I personally completely disagree with, because these are genuine problems that women have to deal with. It's not like these should be part of the daily life for people. As for whether or not this is kind of a quote trend, or if it's something a little bit more lone case, I'd say that looking at the 3 perspectives as a whole, the general one of just denying the women's experience in general is definitely less popular, or at least less put out there on the internet and less shown than the other 2 are. But I don't think that it can be ignored in its presence on the internet, because there is definitely people that still think that.
So very quickly, looping back to your first and third perspective on how there's people saying how there should be more voices like this, and how saying she's too in the face. Do you think how we can achieve a fair balance between these 2?
I think that's a hard thing to really strive for. There's going to be people out there with different perspectives and biases on the subject. I personally believe that it's good to have this representation out there. And I kind of understand where people are coming from, saying that, it's too in their face. But at the same time, I think that's what really makes it important. Being able to have this representation and being able to have these experiences thrown in your face is what makes people realize them. Because if they were just subtly mentioned every once in a while, it would have much less ripple effect and much less attention brought to it than if they're really put out there so clearly.
From looking at the two examples, we can see that there's a lot of nuance in media representation.
Looking first at the example of the Little Mermaid remake, we can see that there's a precarious balance between having this representation in the media, being able to inspire the youth and inspire these people, and having these this insane backlash from people from this, right? As well as this possible corporate motivation that can make people feel unsure about the representation that they're seeing. Meanwhile, with She-Hulk, we see a relatively similar example where we have this representation of these experiences of the main character's experience, and yet we have this similar amount of backlash because they feel like this is too in their face, right? We can see these main problems with media representation today, where the backlash that it gets is really focused on, is this representation in like the quote right way, or are these experiences being, too thrown in my face? Am I not comfortable seeing this representation? And that's where we really see these problems come to light. And I mean, as I mentioned earlier, I personally think that, even as people might think this is too in their face, right, or too much for them, that at the same time is kind of the point of the media representation. We have to have this representation to tone down this kind of backlash against having these underrepresented communities in the media, especially when we can see so many benefits from having this.
Exactly. These benefits are shown in what we've seen with The Little Mermaid, how the youth were inspired by characters that Halle played, and it became a source of inspiration for them, and it will later shape the ideas and the mindsets of the younger generations, and letting them know that there's a possibility of change and diversity in our media, and also have them get familiar with the idea of the possibility of equal representation. And meanwhile, this representation can validate the experiences of others for empowerment, like for example in She-Hulk, with the character talking about the issues that women faced. And these kind of exposure to these representations helps to break down barriers between people and help to let others better understand a community, and therefore help us to lessen stereotypes and judgments, and will help connect communities of people.
And I can really see this kind of media representation reflected in even my own life. As a white female, right, I have more representation than many other people, and have been exposed essentially throughout my entire childhood and life to these characters and people in the media that have various jobs, that do such a broad array of things in my life, that I can see where if people weren't exposed to that, they might not have that same mindset with the idea of being able to do anything. I think that the media that I've been exposed to, that has reflected myself back at me, has probably pushed my own abilities to see my own future.
And for me, as an Asian, I feel like I personally seem like less of that representation in the media. So I feel like a lot of Asian characters that are shown in media are either just like usually side characters, or they have less significance in the film or in the advertisements or whatever media it was. And they usually take on the form of having like strong accents, having like known a lot of like kung fu, or being really good at like math. So definitely I feel like I am less represented in our current media, as in like the States. So I definitely feel like there are room for improvement. Well, that sums up today's episode on media representation.
Thanks for listening to the Fun Duck Histocast. Leave a like, and we can't wait to see you next time.
Bye!